Hey, everybody, this is Mark,
This is Ashley.
and this is Awkward Fist Bump Productions.
Boom.
Boom. Yes, sir. All right.
Yes.
So, if you love our stuff, if you love our content, make sure to like, subscribe, share. We want to thank you guys so much because we finally just hit 1,000 subscribers, which isn't bad for a channel that's just a couple of months old. So, thank you. So, we brought you a bonus interview today. Since we got 1,000, we thought we would bring you an awesome guest. So, for those of you, and let's be honest, the majority of you that
Everybody knows.
subscribe, yeah, well, everybody that subscribes to this show usually is a 60 Days In fan. So, Mark, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yes,
Sheriff
sir.
Lamb out here in Arizona, Pinal County. So if you don't know where that is, we're between Phoenix and Tucson. Our county is the size of the state of Connecticut. We have like you know, Mark, we have a 1,500 bed jail, which typically we run about 550 prisoners a day, and about 650 employees here at the sheriff's office. So yeah, that's who I am, and and I'm a patriot. You know that too. If anybody who follows me knows I love America.
I think
So,
your username is American Sheriff across all your platforms, correct?
It is on Instagram, on Twitter. It's Sheriff Lamb One. It used to be
Okay.
Sheriff Lamb One on all my platforms. That's a whole nother story. But I changed Instagram to American Sheriff. So
I love it. I love it.
and he's got a clothing line, which one day I'm going to buy his shirt.
You have
I
a
don't know if you
clothing
know that.
line?
I haven't done much with it, but yeah, I have a clothing line called Fear Not Do Right.
Oh, I want a t-shirt.
The website's still active. I better check and make sure I don't have any orders sitting there.
Oh my gosh.
So, we're going to put all the links to the bottom and how you can follow Sheriff Lamb. Um, but, man, first of all, we are honored and humbled that someone like you. So, if you haven't kept up with Sheriff Lamb since 60 Days In, he kind of did this show. Well, first of all, kind of preceding 60 Days In, he was on the show called Live PD. Some of y'all may or may not have heard of it. Then he did the Most Wanted, Live PD Most Wanted. And, after he did 60 Days In, but this guy kind of he hangs out at the White House from time to time. So we were just kind of talking. I'm like, my claim to fame is some reality TV show, and I'm kind of washed up now, a washed up reality TV star. So I mean, I'm waiting on the invite to the White House. Haven't received it yet. Maybe you can
The problem is
facilitate
you got
that.
to fight. You got to fight my wife for that. She is. We got invited again. We got invited to the White House Christmas party last year, and we got invited again this year. So I'm praying. I know we're not supposed to talk politics, but I'm praying for a certain outcome on Tuesday. So
Well,
that'll
you'll
make
lose
my
your
visit to the
invite.
White House Christmas party a lot better.
Yeah,
Oh
I
man,
understand that. I understand that.
that sounds
So
so much fun.
yeah, no. I mean, I
I want to
to
go to
be
the
honest,
Easter egg hunt at the White
oh,
House.
that would be cool. To be honest,
Well,
I don't care.
I was there back in June, and so they couldn't do the Easter egg hunt. So when I went in
Oh,
June, they had this whole box of Easter eggs, like these wooden
aw.
Easter eggs, painted Easter eggs. So they're like, Sheriff, you may as well take some Easter eggs. That was right between the time I had been tested for COVID, and then they called me and told me I needed to come back downstairs because I tested positive for COVID. So I had
Ew.
enough time to grab a handful of eggs before got booted out the White House
I would have done the
for
same
having
thing.
COVID.
I would
Yeah.
have done the
So
same thing.
those are sitting in our house. We got those painted eggs.
That's awesome. So the majority of people that subscribe to this channel, they subscribe because of 60 Days In. So let's talk a little 60 Days In if you're okay with that, Sheriff Lamb.
Let's do it.
How how did A&E approach you? Did they approach you? Did you approach them? Well, what happened there that you were able to get 60 Days In in your facility?
So we got approached actually by A&E for live PD early on. Like I had just taken office, and so we're like, hey, we're just barely trying to get our feet underneath us. We're like a baby deer on ice here. Let
Hmm.
us get our feet underneath us, and then we'll get back to you. So about 6 months into it, we finished our budget, got our new budget going, and so we
Right.
reached out to live PD, and within about a week, they were already at our agency. I mean, I think we contacted them on a Monday, and on a Friday they were already there. And so at the same time, pretty much, the producers for 60 Days In contacted us and said, hey, we want to do this show in the jail. And so we were highlighting the guys on the road. I thought it was only fair to highlight the good work that the men and women do in the jail as well. And how do you get an inside look at your jail without paying millions of dollars. I don't think there's any way to do it, first of all, other than 60 days in. And this was at no cost to the taxpayer for us. So for us, this was a good thing. But that took about 6 months of going through legal stuff and making sure that we had absolved ourselves of the majority of the liability. So all this time we're doing live PD. And then I think probably around January, February is when it really started kicking in for 60 days in. And I think by March, you guys were in there, right?
I know my booking date was the 1st of March. March the 1st is when I entered your facility.
Was that before or after your little trip to Hawaii or wherever you went?
That was David. That was David. I went.
You went to
Brooke that went to Hawaii.
Who went to Hawaii? How did y'all go to Hawaii?
Or maybe it wasn't Brooke.
What is this?
Yeah, this is a whole story. They don't know this story.
Okay, well she does it.
So
what happened was, well, first of all, as this production, and you've dealt with production now, so you know, they called me in July or August to start the interview process. I didn't hear from them basically, even though I kept getting promoted, I didn't hear from them for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And I was like, okay, I guess they went with someone else. And then, as is usual with production, they called me mid-January, maybe a little bit past mid-January. And they're like, are you still interested in doing this show? And I said, sure. They said, okay, cool. Give us a day and we'll be back in touch with you. We're going to talk to the sheriff. We're going to talk to A&E. And because it's another company that does all the casting. So then they call back and they're like, yeah, you got to be here in 2 weeks. Like, oh, okay. Nothing like having a lot of time to mentally prepare yourself to go to jail. But so we come out there and we film all the beginning where, Sheriff Lamb and the associated posse, because you're from Arizona, so I'll use the word posse, comes in and they give us the briefing. And something happened at your facility something
let me
went
tell
down.
You. No. Well, I'll tell you what happened. So we show up for that the day where you show up and you give them like the orientation. You're like, hey, watch out for this. Who are you? Blah, blah, blah. So we're doing all that. And the producer or the guy that's actually the director or whatever he was.
Oh, yeah.
We're like, hey, man. We started calling him Tweaker Chris because he was high. Like he was seriously high. And so we go through the whole day. And at the end of the day, I called the producer and I was the owner of the company. I was like, hey, man, this he's on drugs.
That's
all
right.
of us are seasoned law enforcement officers and we could tell. So we were calling him Tweaker Chris throughout the whole day and joking around and stuff. So then about a week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, and they're ready. The day we were supposed to book in the first guy, I don't know if it was you or I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Abner.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we were getting ready to book in the first guy. Literally 30 minutes from my guys were there waiting to book him up, to hook him up and take him to the jail. And we get a call from the producers, and he's like, "We're cutting this. We need a couple weeks to regroup." So this guy, they finally realized that he was on drugs or whatever. And my heart goes out to the guy, anybody who's struggling with drug addiction, but he was having an issue. And so that's why the main guy had to come in and take over the show for a couple weeks till they found a new producer. And
we can't say their names, but that's because you, Mark, you knew the main guy because we talked about this on the phone once. I couldn't remember what his name was because all I did was send emails with him. But the big top dude, he actually came down and took over with you guys because he was hands off with us.
He did a great job. And to be honest with you, we had actually told them, if you don't change this out, we're cutting the show off.
Yeah.
Because they had left a tool in the jail while they were putting the cameras in. And so,
oh, no.
Yeah, luckily one of the inmates comes up and is like, hey, these camera guys forgot a screwdriver here. And so we're like, come on, man. So it was, finally we said, hey, if you don't change this out, we're going to have to probably cut this off. Okay. And they changed it out. So that was why you guys got a hiatus. And this is where they needed to do something with all these guys for 2 weeks? Like a week or two.
I want to say it was 2 weeks. And it actually worked out for the better on a personal level for me because, and I don't know if you knew this or not, Sheriff Lamb, but one of my buddies is a deputy down here in Georgia. and he had actually been shot serving a warrant. They killed a
Oh, I
city
didn't know
PD
that.
officer. Yeah,
I
they
remember this.
okay. So basically, what happened is he was one of those, what do you call them, sovereign citizens,
Oh
and
yeah.
they went to serve a warrant on this guy, and he literally, it was a parking ticket. And they told him, they said, look, if you go and you will take care of these charges, we won't do anything. And the guy started spouting off the sovereign citizen crap. And so they said, oh, here we go. So my buddy and his partner called in for backup. One of the city PD guys showed up. They went in. The city PD guy was shot and killed. My buddy was shot under right in the under stomach, so it went under his vest.
Oh.
And he's actually been even, we filmed this, what, 2 years ago, if not a little bit longer than, probably 2.5 years ago, and he's still struggling. So it worked out actually for the best, because I got to go home and sit at his hospital bed for a
Oh
while.
man, I didn't know
So
that.
yeah,
Oh,
I'm
wow.
surprised, because I told everybody there at production what was going on. So, but they probably didn't want to bother you. It is what it is. But so prayers to you, Sid, because I know you're still there. It was a terrible experience, but it worked out for the best. But yeah, I do remember that guy, and I
Well, I
remember
remember
he
one
seemed a
went.
little a
Yeah,
little
he was
crazy.
he was way crazy. He was all over the place during that first day of filming. And so
Oh my
we
gosh.
went to one person went to like Hawaii, one person
Hmm.
went to Colorado. That was
Was this
Steve.
at the was this paid for by production? Like, did they just like, hey, go
Yeah,
hang out
Yeah.
somewhere?
I think so.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, they pretty much told us that we could get a one-way ticket anywhere we wanted to, as long as and that the company would pay for it, as long as we were back, obviously, when when it was time to come back. So they flew us anywhere we wanted to. I'm a married man with kids, so I went home. But I think Brooke went to Hawaii. I want to
Yeah.
say maybe David went. I mean, a couple of them intelligent, especially if you're in David's case, if you're single. Hey, I got a free ticket anywhere. So yeah, that was good stuff.
Yeah.
You
They
didn't.
didn't do
Crazy.
that to me. They took me to briefing and then arrested me on the spot. Like, I didn't
I
get all
remember
of this
that.
fun stuff
Yeah.
that you guys got. I don't know if anybody's ever been more excited to go to jail than I was. I
That
thought it
in
was funny.
that dissipated really quick though once you got in there though, didn't it?
Oh, how long did it take me to start crying? Let's see. I didn't
I don't
shower
think you.
for
Yeah,
three or four
it was
days.
when they left you naked in the place.
Oh
Oh God,
yeah.
that was horrible. That was horrible.
Well, you know, I look at Pinal County versus where you were, Gadsden, Alabama,
Hmm.
and you got to understand, 60 Days In is television, and I'm not bashing production. I never have, I never will. But you got to understand, they got to create stories. So I remember they really concentrated on me complaining about the DO that had a razor blade that walked out on me, and which really was not that big of a deal. But unfortunately, they recorded it, and they kind of have their own little tricks. And once again, I'm not bashing A&E. They have to tell a story, but it like shows that in 60 days, what I learned was this bad DO walked out with a razor blade, and wouldn't let me have a razor. It is what it is. But then you're left
Right.
naked in a cell for like 8 hours.
I'm not
Perspective.
saying that my experience was harder than yours, Mark. However,
Razor blade naked. Yeah.
well, white TV day versus like emotional abuse. I don't know. Like,
I wanted to watch. I wanted to watch. It was March. I wanted to watch some March Madness, and I was stuck. And I don't know if you know this, Sheriff Lamb, but I was stuck in a jail of people that wanted. I mean, in a pod of people that wanted to watch cartoons and stuff like that. I'm like, where's like the manliness here? We're supposed to watch like basketball and football season's over, obviously, and baseball, but
mhm.
you guys want to watch cartoons? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So when it was White TV Day, even though they, I did get a little
I need
heat
a
from that.
minute.
I did get a little heat from that, from the public. It was kind of funny because people are like, wait a minute, this guy's been saying for like the last 2 or 3 episodes how he hates racism, but now he's like, white TV day. So,
well, we got a bunch of stuff too. People are like, oh, Sheriff, I can't believe you run a racist jail. And it's like, no, you guys just don't get how it is. And the inmates do it themselves, they
yeah.
just, race is the biggest thing for them in there. And that's how they separate themselves out. We don't want to separate them into races. So
Yeah, what can you really do?
Each other. You really can't do much. And it's not, most people don't understand it's controlled at the prison level.
Yeah.
So the prison is based on that, and that just trickles down into the jail. And believe it or not, for as bad as it sounds, they do a better job of regulating themselves when you do break it, when they actually break themselves out by race. Because then you can just go in and say, hey, look, we have this issue. You guys need to get it under control. And then everybody goes and gets their own people under control. And so, there's good and bad with it, but it actually saves us a lot of trouble in the end.
But you know what? Y'all got crap because of race. But on the East Coast, at least in Georgia, we will do a lot of separating by gang, because it's gangs that'll run pods on the East Coast, and so they will try to house like Bloods with Bloods, gangster disciples with gangster disciples, Crips with Crips. So you're pretty much doing the same thing that we're doing. You just got the heat because it involves races.
And we still have Crips and Bloods. But what happens is when you go to our jail, that doesn't matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say you have a black guy that is a Blood and then another one that's a Crip. When they go into jail, they're like, nah, you're just black in here. You're kinfolk.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter. When they get out of jail, they go back to being Crips and Bloods. But while they're in jail, all that gang stuff goes by the wayside, especially like with the Mexican mafia. All those little gangs don't matter anymore. I actually went and saw, this is a side note, but I went and listened to a guy who was a sicario for the cartels. And he started out as a little gangster in Phoenix for this little street gang. When he went to prison, of course, the gangs don't matter. You got to go in with your race. Well, he got recruited by the Mexican mafia, the cartel. And when he got out, he started doing hits for them. And I remember they were saying that the guy had probably 30 hits under his belt. And he just was an unassuming little guy. He didn't seem like much at all, but yeah.
So can I make a comment real quick before I forget? One thing that you guys did really help me with that you didn't even know you did. So the title Woods, it's whites only one day
soon. Yeah.
So,
at least that's what Ratchet said.
So I had never heard that term before. I've been in law enforcement at that time when your season came out 5 or 6 years. And I had never heard that term. It was always Aryan Brotherhood and then the little trickles that come down from that. But shortly after your guys' season aired, I arrested a guy and he had Woods tattooed across his chest. And after watching your show, I was like, oh my gosh, I know what that means. I know what that means. And he's like, yeah, I did time on the West Coast. And I was like, oh, neat. Okay, so tell me about this. So are you gang affiliated? And he's like, against my will. He's like, I got this in jail. I got this in prison on the West Coast. I didn't want to be affiliated. And he told me, he was able to tell me his whole story. Like, I didn't want to be affiliated. I didn't have a choice. I would have been killed if I had been a lone wolf out there. So I did what I had to do to survive. And then they branded him Woods somewhere on the West Coast. Yeah. And I would have never known that term or thought to ask those questions and get him a little bit of protection in the jail to let him know, hey, this guy is gang affiliated. He's got gang tattoos. But if it wasn't for like the way that, cool. I mean, you guys were able to express a lot of, well, here's the different gangs. Here's the way. I mean, it's a sad thing. You know, a lot of people can try to ignore that these things happen in America, but they do happen and they're sad and they're awful. But the way this show has educated me as a law enforcement professional, like with Atlanta, I learned more about the gang activity on the East Coast. With your season, I learned a lot about the different, the racial dynamics in prison and interacting with people like that. So it helped me out in my law enforcement career. It was very, very valuable information. So.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you end the interaction with that guy by offering him a Bible study and a fist bump?
This was pre me going to jail. So,
do your fans know about Coach Hedrick coming in and giving you a pep talk?
No.
What?
No. Yeah, because, a lot of that stuff wasn't aired. So, yeah, coach.
So Mark, we were concerned because Mark's walking around fist bumping everybody, and we were concerned that Mark just wasn't hitting the mark. No pun intended. Or pun intended. One of the two. Yeah. So we actually tell Hedrick, who's our chief of our jail, we're like, hey, go in there and talk to Mark and get him fired up. Like, he's got to do better. So Mark's thinking he's doing good. You know, he's in there fist bumping people. And this is to Mark's credit. But he goes in there and Chief Hedrick rips his ass. Like, he's just like tears into him. Like, you're not doing anything and you need to pick up your game and we expect more from you and this and that. And Mark leaves with his tail between. I got to be honest, Mark picked up his game. At that point, we saw a distinct difference in how Mark started doing things. And in the end, you killed it. But it was at that point where Coach Hedrick came in. We call him Coach Hedrick. He came in and he gave you a chewing, didn't he? He chewed your butt.
He did, because I was like, uh-oh. And then, of course, you know, as his network, you know, you can't just do anything with, hey, let me talk to you real quick and pull you out.
Yeah.
Everything was filmed, and I was surprised it didn't make the final edit. But yes,
we were surprised too.
I can give that man credit. He fired me up, and you know, I guess I wound up becoming second in charge of the woods.
Yeah.
So weird. But that's not something, by the way, just to clear the air. I do not put that on my resume. Just, you know, second in charge of the woods, you know, did time in jail. Yeah, that doesn't go on my resume.
That was very interesting that you were selected for that, for being an outsider and them, you know, a lot of your inmates, they know each other. They grew up together. They're all from the same community, right? Like, especially with county jails, everybody knows everybody who comes in there.
For the most part, it's probably less for the whites than it is for the Hispanics and the kinfolk. But yeah, for the most part, they're from these communities, so it's from the area, which makes it challenging for booking people in. And we can get back to that, but that's what made it challenging for getting people booked in. So
yeah, well, let's get back into that, because a very good point is we didn't do the standard booking process. You didn't do our fingerprints, and actually, I don't know if you know this, but they almost threw me in the pod without ever giving me paperwork either, because you know that we were supposed to have paperwork when you got in the pod, and I'm just walking down the hallway. I'm like, they got to know what they're doing, and then I'm getting ready to take a right to go into a 200 cell, and all of a sudden you could just tell it like hit. They're like, hey, come here real quick, and they pulled me into I don't know whose office that was. I guess that was where you did your intel office with the office that they had.
Jay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was Montoya that pulled me in, and I guess she was there with her lieutenant, and they were like, "Oh crap, we almost put you in. Here's your paperwork." And I was like, "Oh, okay, good," because it didn't occur to me that that's what was going on. But
I didn't get any paperwork.
Oh, we had to. Everyone had.
Oh,
paperwork.
If you don't have
paperwork,
your charges, they'll check your paperwork within the first 10 minutes. 5 minutes, they'll check your paperwork. You walk in that pod, they want to see your paperwork.
Yep, because they want to know.
It's the actual inmates want to see your paperwork.
Yeah, they want to know if your charges are good or not. And what I mean by
you
good.
You thought we were BSing when we were telling you guys.
No.
What's the term? CHOMO?
Yeah, CHOMO. They want to make sure you're not a child molester. They want to make sure you're not a wife beater. Yeah. But yeah, talk about the booking process, Sheriff Lamb.
Yeah, so it was tough for us because our booking process, we were like, hey, there's no way I can get these guys booked in if I don't have a couple people on the inside. So normally you keep it pretty tight. We had to bring in, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 people in on it at the jail site so we could get you booked in. Because if not, we wouldn't have been able to get you booked in. But
makes sense.
When we were telling everybody their charges, it's hard here because you can't have drug charges. If you have somebody that has drug charges, then the cartel's going to wonder why you were pushing drugs through their community.
Oh.
And so everybody had to have we had to work through and figure out what charges can we have. That's why everybody ends up being on a warrant, out-of-state warrant, because it's the easiest way to hold somebody. And it raises the least amount of questions. Because there was a couple people like, well, I want to come in for drug charges. We're like, no, if you're caught with 10 pounds of marijuana, the cartel's going to want to know why you had 10 pounds of marijuana in their territory. And so that's why we had to really work around the charges. Do you remember we gave Brooke her charges one day, and then we came in the next morning, and the production company's like, "Hey, Brooke wants to talk to you about her charges and what she gets booked in under." And so we show up, and she's wearing this cocktail dress, and she's like, "I was thinking that I could come in and say that I was booked for like DUI, and I'll put some alcohol on me, and I'll just get booked in like this." And we're like, "No, you will. First of all, you'll be a target if you come in that cocktail dress and all dolled up." I said, "Second of all, we can't hold you for 30 days for that. Like, we can't hold you for 60 days. You'll get OR'd in the morning, and everybody will know that." And so that's what a lot of people don't realize is when you're trying to figure out what your charges are, it can't just be anything, because you have to justify, why is that person still in here 60 days later? The inmates, for whatever you think, are not dumb. They are very astute when it comes to those things, and they know who belongs. They know the court systems and how it works, and they know who should be in here for how long and all that stuff. So that part was very difficult to come up with reasons of why everybody was in there and why they were in there for 60 days. So that was a tough part. And then getting you guys booked in, none of you followed instructions, not a single one of you. Every one of them were like, "Don't do this, don't do that, don't say this, don't do that." And then they get in there, and at some level, every one of them messed it up. Especially Steve.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's what question I wanted to ask. Did you have one, Mark? You go first.
No, we'll talk about Steve in a minute. You go ahead, because we got.
Okay.
I have a feeling we're gonna spend a while on the Steve topic. Go ahead.
Okay. So from your perspective, you put a lot on the line. We mentioned before we started filming that you were not really exposing, but you were sharing with the world how your officers on the streets work, a very unedited, raw look at how you run your patrol. Then you do the same thing in your jail. There's no secrets with the Sheriff Lamb administration. It's like, open up wide. Here we are. This is everything that I've got to offer, and this is how we're doing it. And you're welcome to take a look. Putting civilians in undercover, I know it was stressful for me going undercover, and I can't imagine the responsibility that you felt for all those people that were in there. So when you're watching this and you're getting alerts from the production staff about what's going on with David's situation and with Steve's situation, how did that make you feel? Like, because you put your whole career into this. Like, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, he filmed a TV show and he was a couple episodes and he was the boss. No, you put your whole entire career on the line for this. So how did it feel to see those kind of things, people not taking it completely seriously? Not saying David didn't take it seriously, because I really believe he cared a lot. But Steve, for example, like how did that make you feel?
Well, thank you for saying that. It's a great point. And we try to be very transparent. We represent the taxpayer, and so we want the taxpayer to see firsthand exactly what kind of job we do. And there's no way to know how you can do the job better unless you're willing to take a look and be open and honest about how your agency. So for us, we want to be the best agency, and so that requires being open and transparent and putting yourself on the line. And you're right, as an elected official, I kept telling people, I told these guys, I said, I'm on the line. My neck is on the line if you guys screw this up, because I won't get reelected. So yeah, it was very stressful. The whole time it was stressful. Every time these guys would do something, it was like, oh my gosh, you don't want to kill these guys. We would get those updates all the time. We're like, what are they thinking? Oh my gosh, they're going to screw this up for us. Why can't they follow instructions? So yeah, it was a stressful time for us. But in the end, we knew that the end result was going to be okay. I'll tell you what, it was hard for me to convince my people to do live PD and to do 60 days in, because a lot of folks that I come from the business world before, and so I view things differently, and I'm willing to take risks. And I think I see things differently. So a lot of the guys within my agency were like, oh, the cop alarms go off. People who've been in this industry for a long time say they get very uncomfortable with opening up how we do our job. And so that was tough in and of itself, is getting my people to buy on. And kudos to them once we decided to do it. I have great staff. Once we make a decision, we go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we back each other up, and we're in it together. And so my staff was great about that. So yeah, getting it all in there, having the staff on board, and then also dealing with what comes up in the show is crazy. You know, Steve was stressful. We knew Steve wouldn't last. We had bets in our office. We thought maybe he'd last a week or two. He actually lasted less than 20, I think 30 hours is what he lasted. The show makes it seem like he was in there longer, but
they actually put him in for like 3 or 4 episodes. It was like, dude, he was on the TV show longer than he was in the jail. They really had to stretch that out.
Steve, and they don't show it. So Steve, I booked Steve in. So I take Steve, and it wasn't. People think, oh my gosh, the sheriff's booking somebody in, everybody's going to know something's up. No, because I was already booking. I would ride around before the shows ever come on, and I would book people in for the deputies so they didn't have to drive all the way to the jail. So that was common. So when I booked Steve in on the way there, I was like, hey, man, you ready to go? And he's like, oh, I think I'm going to do okay. Yeah. And I go, whoa. You think? I said, if you haven't made up your mind that you're going to last the 60 days right now, then there's no way you're going to last 60 days. He said, no, I think I can do it. And I was like, nah, if that's your attitude, you're not going to make it. They don't show that on, I don't know why they didn't show that part on him, but I was like, no, man, you need to make up your decision right now that you're going to last the 60 days. So we knew he wouldn't make it. So we book him in. He walks up to the pod, and as soon as he gets to the pod, he's like, we told him, don't ask any questions. Just go to your pod, lay down, and mind your own business. So he gets up there, and right before they put him in the pod, he's like, oh, what time's dinner or lunch? And the guard's like, well, you should have already had it when you went to court. And he's like, well, I didn't go to court. Oh. Just set off all sorts of alarms. And so they bring him back down. And then they end up booking him in another pod where we didn't have cameras. That's not where the cameras. So then we had to figure out, how are we going to take this guy from this pod? What excuse do we have to take him from this pod to that pod? So, I mean, it was like nonstop with Steve. And so finally we're dealing with Steve's issues. And then I come in the next morning and they're like, hey, Sheriff, Steve's threatening to blow this whole thing open on the phone and stuff. And I was like, get him out of there. Get him out of there. Yeah. We're done. I'm done with him. Because it was nothing but problems from the time that he had gotten in there. And so we yanked him out. And it was funny because my chief takes Steve out, and my chief just takes him and walks him straight out the jail. And there's a guy holding I'm going to grab a paper. The sergeant's holding this piece of paper, and he walks out and he's like, Chief, he's like, what do we do here? And,
oh my gosh.
Chief comes back and he's like, don't worry about it. I'll take care of all that stuff. So we just kicked him out the jail, and we're like, done. We didn't even do like a review with him. We didn't pull him in and ask him what he found out. Nothing. We was gone.
And for those of you that watched the reunion, you know he definitely came across as a real pain in the ass, and he was. But and I'm looking for validation here, Sheriff. I would say that and I tell people all the time that watch the reunion, they're like, that guy was a real just idiot, man. I'm like, no, you don't understand. He got a positive edit at the reunion. And they're like, what do you mean he got a positive edit? I was like, he was a lot worse than the show actually showed him as far as at the reunion. It was a lot worse.
It was. So the reunion, man, the reunion's going great. The conversations are flowing, and we were probably 5 or 6 hours by the time
I was going to say, I think we started at like 8 in the morning, and it was about maybe 6 o'clock at night. Yeah.
I know I had to get there at 5 for hair and makeup, and then they started filming at 8. It was how they did it for us.
Yeah. So we bring Steve in probably 5 hours into it.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, all of a sudden now, yeah, so we had been there probably 5 hours recording before Steve came in. So then they bring Steve in, and then fireworks go off. Like, everything just is going sideways now. Everybody's arguing and fighting with Steve. Mark about gets up and kills him. They show that, but I mean, it was a lot more intense in real life. And then My chief deputy, I thought I was going to have to restrain him. That I thought he would go over and kill him. It was fireworks. And just to show you what a bad mojo he set, after he walked off the set, the camera stopped working. And then we were down for like another hour where they were trying to get all the cameras back up and working. And I was like, man, that's how bad of a mojo he had, that he actually shut the whole program down. The camera shut down, everything. But in the end, it made for good TV. But in real life, it was pretty intense during that interview.
It made me so mad because it was so disrespectful, and I wasn't there for you guys, so I'm coming at it from purely a fan perspective, because we've talked about this before. I really believe in the 60 Days In project. Outside of the whole TV thing, I could care less about the TV show. It's the project that means a lot to me, and being a police officer means a lot to me. And then seeing him come in and just casually say to you, oh yeah, I was high when you booked me in, and just all that stuff. And I'm like, it's so disrespectful. You present yourself as this professional person. And the whole point of the show, and correct me if I'm wrong, ultimately we want to save lives and create a safe environment for everyone, deputy and inmate alike.
So
absolutely.
Treating it like a game.
I do have a side note for you, which really, really irritated the crap out of me too, is I talked to one of the PAs, and one of the PAs, so a PA, if you don't know what that is, that's kind of like the beginning person in production. They're kind of like, if you will, the officer, the private in the military. They're kind of like so they just started, but they actually told me that the entire drive from Phoenix, or I'm sorry, we stayed in Tempe, Arizona, to the entire drive to Florence, which is about an hour and a half, if I remember right, at least an hour, if not an hour and a half.
It's a good hour, yeah. It's about an hour.
That he was smoking and when I say smoking, I don't mean cigarettes. That he was lighting up joints like weed the entire drive down, and I'm like, I don't get it, because maybe I'm just, I'm from Georgia, and this cold country town here, but I don't get why didn't you just stop the car and call your bosses and say, I'm not driving them? Because in my opinion, I don't know about in Arizona, but in Georgia, if you get pulled over and they smell weed, you're going to jail. I mean, especially if you have it right there, you are going to jail.
What's Arizona's laws? I'm sorry to interrupt.
So Arizona's most of possession of marijuana is going to get pled out to, it's a class 6 felony, but it's going to get pled out to a class 1 misdemeanor typically, unless it's a DUI. 70% of our DUIs in Arizona and here in our county, 60 to 70% are DUI drugs, and a lot of those are DUI marijuana. So yeah, it is against the law. Even if somebody else is smoking it in the car, that would still be an issue. So you're right, Mark. I'm surprised they didn't stop the car, but yeah, Steve could have got arrested if that was the case. They probably would have just issued him a citation, probably not booked him in.
Okay. So we got to jump on one more topic, because I know as far as time, we're probably getting close, but Sheriff Lamb. So the whole thing kind of blows up. Bratcher, who's the officer that David pulled out of the pod, apparently somehow gets suspicions that we're 60 days in. At the same time, B. Shaw, everything happens with B. Shaw. Let's talk about all that for a minute. What happened with Bratcher that really kind of made him realize we were possibly not at least who we claimed we were?
Bratcher wasn't the issue, and Bratcher still to this day, and I didn't push the issue. The production company really wanted me to push the issue, but I said, look, I'm dealing with 2 law enforcement guys, David and Bratcher, and I'm not going to pit them against each other, and I'm not going to cause either one of them to lose their career over this show. So I'm not going to push the issue of who's lying or who's not. There was discrepancies as to who said what to who, but Bratcher wasn't the issue. The issue was B. Shaw. That was the issue. When B. Shaw found out, B. Shaw immediately asked to be transferred to the other pod. He goes back into the pod where Abner is, and he rats Abner out. And it was not because of David didn't say that this was 60 days in, but he mentioned Abner.
Yep.
And Bishaw was smart enough to put it together. He's like, dude, how's this guy from New York and how's this guy from Detroit know each other? They shouldn't know each other. So Bishaw puts it together. He goes back over in there. And then now all of a sudden we start listening to gel calls and they're saying, hey, we need to do pedigree checks on everybody.
Yep.
And so what pedigree checks is every race, the whites, the blacks, the Mexicans, everybody now starts doing pedigree checks, making sure that whoever's in there is legit. And so that was the concern for Mark and concern for David. So David, we pull out immediately. And now we're like, how are the wheels coming off? Can we keep this going? And we realized quickly we can't. So Abner, the day that Abner got pulled out, we were fearing for Abner. Like, my chief woke up at 4:30 in the morning and he woke up from a dead sleep and he thought, I got to get Abner out of here. And then Abner that same morning woke up at 4:30 in the morning and he's like, man, I got to get out of here. Mm-hmm. So Abner gets ready and then when we went back and reviewed all the footage, they were getting ready to put it on Abner. Abner probably, if we wouldn't have pulled him out that morning, they would have assaulted him. And so we luckily listened to our guts and we just said, we came in at 6 a.m. We're like, Abner's got to come out. And we pulled him out immediately. And we went back and reviewed the footage and we were lucky we did. And I think we left you in there just a little bit longer. We weren't as concerned, but it was stressful. But it wasn't really Bratcher though. So it was Bishaw. Bishaw is really who caused the problems for us he sniffed it out and he put Abner at risk. And that's why we shut it all down. It wasn't Bratcher so much.
And I remember we were all cool with Bishaw, and then just all of a sudden one day, and it was literally the day he transferred. He's like, I just got to get out of this pod. I'm like, what's going on, dude? Are you all right? I just got to go. I got to get out of this pod. And but he was all cool right beforehand. So now, of course, hindsight being 2020, it comes all together. But and then they had beef earlier anyway, so he gets to go back and fry Abner now. So
which is what he did.
So I want to talk one more thing because I know we're getting once again as far as from a time standpoint. I was told, and a lot of things you don't see. In fact, it was left off the show completely. But I was told, hey, I've got 2 missions for you: gel operations, which everyone knows about gel operations, gangs, and the other mission. But the second mission you had for me was to go to the veterans pod. And so one thing you guys all missed, which would have been probably pretty funny if they had aired it, is so Sheriff Lamb comes up to me and he's like, okay, man, starting on day 1, start putting in kites, which are written requests to go to the veterans pod. So I'm doing it every other day at least. I didn't want to do it too much, but but I was doing it all the time. And so finally, I get this gentleman who I guess is the director of your veteran service, where he's over that pod, and he interviews me. And was he even in on the? Did he know who we were?
No, he didn't know.
Okay, so he he pulls me out in that little center area there next to the control tower, and he's like, yeah. He starts talking. Well, see, the thing is, I did 13 years in the Army, so I can definitely talk the talk. And I remember he sat there and he said, dude, he said, I completely believe you. He said, a lot of people, I kind of question if they're being serious. He said, but you talk the talk, you walk the walk. He said, I have no doubt you were military. Pack your stuff up. Let's go. Get out of here. Let's go to the veterans pod. So I'm like all happy. I'm like, okay, cool. So I pack all my stuff up. Man, I get up there. I get put in a camo. So their jumpsuits, they don't have the orange jumpsuits that they have camouflage, which was really kind of cool. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because I definitely want Sheriff Lamb you to talk about it. But I'm up there maybe an hour, and not even an hour probably. I'm up there 20 minutes, and in fact, I've still got my orange pants on, and I've got my camouflage top on. And all of a sudden, you got to go back. You got to go back to the pod. And I'm like, what? So then I get pulled out, and I kind of get centered in the next interview. And they're like, why did you go do this? And I'm like, what do you mean, why did I go do this? And why did you think that you could just sneak off and go into some other pod without us watching you. You know we have no cameras there. And I'm like, I had no idea we didn't have cameras there. I'm just doing what Sheriff Lamb told me. So talk about that for a second. Yeah, I know you're smiling like, what's going on? Yeah, this was some good.
One of the things we did want to highlight was the Veterans Pod. We were hoping that we could do something in the Veterans Pod. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. You went over there. There weren't any cameras there, so they had to take you back out. The Veterans Pod we started because I believe that our veterans have served this country, and a lot of the veterans that are struggling in life who end up in jail, their problems were precipitated by their service in the military. So we try to take care of them. We're all for ways that we can reduce recidivism in our jail. We found that the Veterans Pod was a great way to do that. We started this Veterans Pod, and you saw it. Like, all of our walls are painted with all the different flags from the branches of the military. We have American flags, POW, Don't Tread on Me, Statue of Liberty painted on the columns. Everything in there is military themed. And the other thing we did is when somebody goes to see the judge, a lot of times these judges are just going from case to case to case, and they don't really realize who's veterans and who's not. So we took it a step further, and we put all of our veterans in camouflage clothes. We found camouflage jail clothes like scrubs, and we put all of our veterans in camouflage clothes so that the judges would also know that they were dealing with a veteran when they came into the jail or into the court. So we got you in there, and we wish we could have kept you in there to showcase that, but it would have been boring. It wouldn't have been good for TV, because those guys actually, they run a very, very there's no chaos in there. It's pretty down there.
So
do you have anything like that for women?
So we let the women participate in the programs, but we don't have enough women veterans to justify isolating them in their own pod. Even now with COVID, we've actually had to put regular folks in the Veterans Pod, because we ran out of space with trying to deal with COVID in our jail as well. So hopefully when COVID starts clearing up a little bit, which it has been, we'll be able to start getting our veterans back in by themselves and getting them on their programs again, their mentorship. I think our recidivism rate is like at 4% for our veterans who go through that program.
Oh, wow.
I run into veterans in our community all the time, and they're like, Sheriff, you changed my life with that program. Thank you so much. So it is something we wanted to showcase on it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to. And but yeah, thank you for bringing it up, because we appreciate our veterans. And for all you veterans out there listening, thank you for your service. I know you guys are both veterans, so we're getting close to Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. We appreciate it.
And we're thinking about your son right now. Your son's currently serving overseas, right?
Yeah, my son is he went to Iraq. And then the Army's like, well, we don't know what we're going to do, so we're
typical Army.
To Kuwait. Yeah. And now he's in Kuwait. Now they're talking about sending him back to Iraq, but currently he's in Kuwait. He's in the 82nd Airborne, stationed out Fort Bragg. So he's a good. We're proud of him, and just praying for him every day, as we do for all the veterans. So, or all of our military, we pray for all of them. So
yeah, we're definitely thinking about him. I feel like this is a good note to kind of tie everything together, because I know we're going at, I see, an hour and 20 minutes right now.
I don't think we're that far. But
we'll edit it a little bit.
Yeah. Yes. But hey, thank you so much, Sheriff Lamb, and we will go ahead and wrap this thing up. We love you guys. Remember, subscribe, like, share, hit the notify button. If you want us to have better sound, go to patreon.com/AFBP and become a subscriber. We're getting merchandise, so maybe we'll throw in a shirt. We'll figure all that stuff out. Love you guys. We'll talk to you later.
Are we fist bumping?
Yeah.